How you been, man?
I'm really bummed out. I had hoped that Marvel was dead, but this weekend proved otherwise.
Why are you hoping Marvel to
I'm
die?
no, I'm kidding. I have to be the contrarian here, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's really funny.
The internet needs somebody to hate, and I'm willing to take on that role.
Yeah, I'm okay with directing hate towards Disney, but Marvel, man, Marvel forever. I mean, I'm a true believer, dude.
I just don't aren't. Am I correct that Disney owns Marvel? How does that work? That's
I
like
don't know. I
I
don't know
don't
if
like
they
that
do.
person, but they've got great feet. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's the sentiment right there. Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to Spider-Man, we did our predictions, or actually our prediction debunk roundup, which I think turned out to be 100% correct. I think every rumor that we talked about was completely fake. The only one I had a slight doubt about was the Gray Hulk one. I thought, oh, maybe he will turn gray for one scene, and that will end up being true. And then the other one that I left out because I didn't want to spoil it for you in case it was true was that he was going to become a man spider. So that one was rumored like way, like a year ago. There was like, oh, Parker's going to become mutated. He's going to become man spider. And there was like all these, comic panels from the comic where he's like, a man spider. So when the first trailer hit, I was like, oh my God, yeah, he might actually become a man spider. But
Honestly, I'm glad that you didn't spoil that one because I would have been, me, as a fan
yes.
of body horror, I would have been like all about it. So I'm glad you didn't get my hopes up, and then I got in there and like the most I got was like black eyeballs.
Mhm. Yeah, I also thought there was a possibility that they were going to do the six arm thing. I mean, but I don't think that was ever in the cards either. So yeah, just to goes to show that like every prediction for this movie, with the exception of Sadie Sink being Jean Grey, they were all 100% incorrect. So
Yep, in a way that's an impressive track record. It's like you have to swing so far off in order to make sure that you miss that many times.
yeah, yeah, that serves as a warning. Any rumors you hear about Clayface or any rumors you hear about Doomsday, they're almost likely to all be 100% bullshit unless they come from us, right?
Correct.
Right.
In which case they're 50% bullshit.
Well, I think this has been a really interesting year for Sony and their Spider-Man universe because they, was it last year or the year before? I think it was last year, right? Where they had three Spider Universe
Yeah.
movies. They were all terrible and all bombed at the box office. And then this year they come out strong with a TV series and the biggest movie in, box office history. So,
And credit where credit is due,
yeah.
rest in peace Spider-Man spinoff. Sony officially announced that they're not pursuing any more of those movies too. So like, good money after bad, at least at some point they recognized this was not a worthwhile venture to keep trying.
Yeah, and I'm not, versed in copyright law and how these agreements work. I mean, I don't, I'm sure they have to keep the things in production in order to hang on to the rights to Spider-Man. So, maybe they will start like production on additional, non-Spider-Man movies, but I would very highly doubt that any of them cross the finish line or get actually greenlit. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I guess the question too is, germane to the point of what we're talking about today, and to my background, is this Spider-Noir is a TV series, but is from Sony. It's on Amazon Prime, but it's a I don't call it Sony ancillary Spider-Man character that's not a villain. I guess you would say at best he's an anti-hero, but like this might be the new direction of them trying to figure out like, well, maybe the mistake was taking villains and trying to make hero movies out of it. Maybe we should try to take heroes and make hero movies out of it, or hero shows. So I don't know. Maybe that's the new model.
I think it will be. I mean, they announced more than a year ago, I think, that they're in development of a Spider Punk series or movie. I can't remember if it was a movie or a series. But yeah, all of the other stuff that they had in the works, like the Bad Bunny Luchador one, I think that's probably fallen by the wayside. I'm trying to think of other things they've announced that are clearly not going to happen anymore. But yeah, I'd expect them to make some progress on Spider Punk. And I think a while back they had the Lord and Miller had a Silk series in the works as well, like the character who's a female spider person. But that yeah,
That's
that
a gender inclusive title, Spider
that
Person.
fell through. But yeah, I would expect them to lean away from the villain stuff and just do like what works. So
Yeah, I
um,
mean, unless Clayface comes out and is a monster hit, in which the case they're like, Maybe we should go back to that well.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I don't know. I mean, they had like actual, yeah, I don't know. I just don't think that it's likely. But that said, like obviously, Spider-Man: Brand New Day was a huge commercial hit, and critically, it seemed I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, it has a pretty healthy critical response. But then, you and I have our reactions to the movie, which I think will be fun to delve into. But I thought it was interesting to look at the broader, Spider output this year, because Spider Noir, I was looking at the Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, and that was pretty highly received well for critics as well too. And I watched the show, you watched the show, and we both had positive reactions to it. So yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting too because I I feel like they're almost opposites in some ways. Like Spider Noir is an enormous swing
hmm
that I didn't, until you just said that, I didn't think was super well received. I mean, not well received. It was like reviewed well, but I hadn't heard anything about how well it was actually doing in terms
yeah,
of like people watching it. That I don't know. Whereas with Spider-Man Brand New Day, there was already like sort of an upswell of like, Marvel backlash, Marvel so cooked kind of crap beforehand, and then it ends up being the fastest movie to $1 billion or something like that. It's like beat out Endgame and everything. So like, and when I say opposites, I kind of mean Spider-Man Brand New Day is not a big swing in the sense of like what it does, quote unquote, different compared to Spider Noir, but arguably it did something right, man, because it, lit the friggin' world on fire.
yeah,
So yeah, it's interesting. Like I think we talked about this, you and I actually, which is like I've come to accept that the things that I am most interested in are not the things that will make a comic book movie successful. And so that's one of the reasons why I like having these conversations, because it like allows me to recognize that
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
probably best that people are not catering to my tastes.
Well, let's jump into because I don't we don't really have a structure for this conversation, but how it led me to think, oh, maybe we should talk about Spider Noir in addition to Spider-Man: Brand New Day is because I got out of the movie. I saw it at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, so I saw it a few hours before you. I held back on letting you know what I thought. You saw it. You texted me. You sounded pretty underwhelmed by it. You were like, it was okay. Like the first 30 minutes were amazing. The rest of it, not so much. And we talked, and hearing from you like what you did and didn't like about it, like I started to think, well, what's a version of this movie that Chris would have liked, And I started thinking like because you'd said, oh, it would have been great if there was more Tombstone in it, or if there was less of the Jean Grey stuff, or you know what I mean. And the
Yeah.
more I started to like write it in my head, I was like, oh, what if it was a story where Spider-Man's lost his girl and he's up against like a mobster like Tombstone or like Kingpin, or maybe he's even up against Tombstone, right? And then there's like a network of other bad guys that he has to go up against, like Scorpion or Boomerang or whoever. And then as I was like writing it in my head, I was like, oh, but that's basically what Spider Noir was, right?
Yeah. No, it's
It was
true.
like, and so I was like, oh, well, and I know that you liked that one better too. So like, there was a part of me that was like, oh, it is interesting because there is a version that I could see a film version of the basic structure of Spider Noir working as a 2 hour movie that is a Tom Holland led like MCU version. You know what I mean? Where he's like
Mm.
fighting a mob boss with villain allies that he has to take out one by one, and he teams up with Punisher to do it or whatever. But that would have felt maybe like more like a classic Spider-Man comic or something like that that you would maybe said that would have appealed to you more. I don't know. I don't want
Yeah.
to scare
So
you, but that's kind of where it went. Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. I what I realized, I actually made a short on social this year that like blew up. I was surprised about, which was talking about the '90s pulp boom. It was talking about like Dick Tracy and the Phantom and the Shadow, like those movies. And I realized that I'm apparently not the only person that was an enormous fan of those and still remembers them fondly. And so I wonder if there has been an upswell of people interested in Spider Noir, because it definitely does tap into that vibe. And what I think is interesting to me is that like there's something about the tone of Spider Noir that allows for it being allowed off the leash in a way that something that does still have to fold into the MCU in a major way narratively simply isn't allowed to. And the thing that reflected that to me was the opening, like I said, I don't know, 20 25 minutes. I don't know exactly how long, but the opening of Spider-Man felt like an issue of Spider-Man to me. And then it became a crossover movie at a certain point. Like it became a let's fold this back into the bigger picture thing. And it's interesting. Like there was so much talk about that this was going to be a grounded Spider-Man take, and I think in comparison to like Endgame, they literally mean grounded, like takes place on Earth. But I don't particularly think this was a super grounded movie in the sense that like they were battling someone who could control people's minds, and there was like tank battles traveling throughout the street. There was a point at which everyone in a, I don't know, 7 mile radius was frozen in place. Like it wasn't, you know, a your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man story particularly. In the first 25 minutes it was though. Like in the first 25 minutes it was he was talking to a cop and trying to stop villains and like hanging out in his attic, and he doesn't have much money or much direction. Like that felt very much like what I know Spider-Man to be from the comics, you know, or at least the
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the normal, you know, I don't know what you call it, default Spider-Man. But like for me, it I hate to say like the tyranny of story, but it does feel like at a certain point they were like, all right, awesome, we check that box. Let's get back to the rest of the stuff we got to do for the rest of the universe. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I think where I disagree is that I think when they mean grounded, like I think what did carry through the whole movie, which you and I might disagree on, but I do think that like his emotional journey was pretty much like the through line through the entire thing for me, you know. So I think that's where they meant grounded. And then so like just to get the spoilers out of the way, I mean we spoiled it already, but the movie has a huge presence in with Jean Grey as the central villain of the movie, which introduces the mutants, which is the precursor to X-Men, which is a big, obviously, tentpole for Disney going forward, right? So I was in a similar boat with you where I thought, how are they going to juggle all of this? It's going to be a mess. And what I found during the movie is it never felt like a mess to me or never felt overstuffed, because what I thought was going to happen walking in was that there was going to be like an A plot, a B plot, a C plot, a D plot, and then like like a Guy Ritchie movie, they were all going to like crash and collide at the end, and it was what I mean, like, and I was like that has the potential to be terrible. But for me at least, watching the movie, like they introduced the villain Jean Grey pretty early on, so that like that to me felt just like the through line for the whole movie was Spider-Man versus Jean Grey, not a third act like surprise villain or something like that. You know what I mean? It felt like the central conflict was the two of them versus each other. So in that way, it felt very cohesive to me, like just something that just felt like a decent like good guy versus bad guy type story,
Yeah.
with his personal stuff mixed in, right? Like, so it felt more like an A plot with a B plot than like all of these separate things that like needed to be serviced. So that's how I approached it, and ultimately liked it. But I could definitely see how you might view it a different way. Yeah.
Yeah, for me it was like I don't disagree with you. I think they did a good job of folding all of the pieces together. For me, it was just that like there were two pieces I was interested in, and I mean this is entirely subjective, so I just want to be clear about that. But I wasn't particularly interested in the Jean Grey stuff, and I also didn't like it wasn't poorly made. I want to say I think Dustin, wait, what's his name?
Destin Daniel Cretton.
Destin Daniel Cretton. I always confuse the order of them. I think Cretton did a really good job. Like, I think this movie is remarkably well directed, and I feel like credit to him because without him, and I think without Holland's central performance, I probably would have liked the movie less. I think that they did a really good job of having to check several boxes that I don't know that Cretton would have necessarily felt was necessary. But what what it reminds me of is like I said the first 20 minutes feels like a Spider-Man issue to me. There is a Punisher Spider-Man Marvel team up movie in here as well. And there is also a Spidey versus story against Jean Grey in here as well. And then there's a Hulk smash, and what it felt like to me is they did a very good job of sticking all of these pieces together with stuff so that they don't feel like they're in separate stories. But it did feel to me like almost all of them felt cobbled together so that we can have all of these things in there. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Like
Yeah.
it didn't feel to me like if they had had any other character other than Jean Grey doing that part, I don't know what would have been missing if it wasn't Jean Grey, right? And arguably, I would say, like, I felt kind of, I don't want to say bad because, Mark Ruffalo got his paycheck, but like, it definitely felt to me like the Hulk was just weirdly sort of, they were just done with him the second they were done with him, Like, I'm not saying I wanted a prologue where we see him back at work and talking to students or whatever, but it did feel like the second that he stopped being a smash danger, like he just vanished. He was like, oh, we're done with that guy. He's out.
Yeah.
Like the Punisher had like a full through line, but like the Hulk was like he it's sort of very important part of the beginning of like steering Peter Parker's character. But then there was that moment where like he popped back in and he was a threat, and then like he woke up and he's like, "What the fuck's going on?" And then he was gone. It was I don't know, it felt really like that sequence actually felt more like if it had just been the first bit, I would have been like, that totally makes sense, and that's a clever cameo because they went to talk. But like it felt like because we already paid Mark Ruffalo, we got to pay off by bringing the Hulk in later. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to, I was gonna bring this up. Like, your enjoyment of the movie is definitely has a bearing on how nitpicky you get. Because, like, I overall like the movie, but I can definitely say that if I didn't, that's totally the kind of thing that I would nitpick as well. I think with Hulk in particular, like I kept thinking his entire journey after Endgame makes no sense whatsoever. Like how he popped up in She-Hulk and in Shang-Chi post credits, and like who he is and how Hulk he is at any given moment is just dependent on how they, it's very like inconsistent and weird. And but because I liked those scenes in the movie, like I'm like, I give it a pass. I don't care.
Yeah. No, and ultimately, I think this maybe is not clear to people, and so if you've listened to this whole thing up until this point, I want to make clear. I actually think the fourth Spider-Man is a good movie. Like without the first 25 minutes, I would have thought it was fine. With the first 25 minutes, I think it's a better than average Marvel movie. For me, I think the problem is, and we've talked about this before, about how much of everything else about the Marvel universe you kind of need in order to hop on to something else. This one didn't have that in the sense of like narrative responsibility, but it did have a lot of like baggage from elsewhere. And in some cases it was like this isn't my own fault. The meta level of a knowledge that we have about a movie before it comes out now had me like super excited about the presence of Tombstone in this movie. So
Yeah.
when I got 15 seconds of Tombstone, I was let down, not because they did a bad job with him, but because they did a good job with him and then he was gone in 15 seconds. Like I was super excited. So I don't know, man. I'm it's not even disappointment about what was delivered. I think it was just like disappointment about what it seemed like they were telling us was going to be there versus what ended up being there. And I know it's not fair when you're making a movie that's, I don't know, $250 million that shoots, that at this point is, what are we, 15, 17 years into a very famous franchise? Of course, it's hard to keep secrets. So it's not their fault that we knew about Tombstone, I don't think. But I don't know how to deal with the idea of that. And this is the second time that that's happened, actually, because I think with Fantastic Four, there was a similar situation where they didn't make a big deal, but a big deal was made about the fact that there were going to be like several villains in the movie. And then it ultimately ended up being almost the exact same thing, which was like a montage at the beginning of like, three or four villains and a bunch of like super intelligent monkeys, but then we'll get to the actual villain later. That one makes a little more sense because it was the first time we ever saw Fantastic Four, but like this is the fourth Spider-Man movie. So I don't know. It made me sad that we got to a peek at so many cool Spider-Man villains, and then the actual villain turned out to just be a hero from another franchise.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that because I think that's one of the most interesting choices they made. And so I think it worked more for me than it did for you. So I think it's worth chatting about. But so like the Jean Grey of it all, I do think it's interesting, like, because I don't think you're alone. I think there are other people who felt disappointed in the movie. And I think that disappointment does come from the fact that the first three Spider-Man movies were chock full of his classic rogues gallery. And then we get to the fourth movie, and his primary antagonist is not somebody who's from, the Spider-Man rogues gallery. It's somebody completely different. And everybody knows Spider-Man has the best rogues gallery. So even though they've used so many of them, there's still plenty more that they could have used as his antagonist, and then ended up being Jean Grey. And I understand the story choices for why they did that, but what I think is interesting, I was thinking about it after the fact. That is a pretty common Marvel thing to do, which is to take a hero and make them the antagonist for one of their movies. But they mostly do it when that character doesn't have a really strong rogues gallery. So for the examples I was thinking of was like Black Panther 2, like had Namor, introduced him. You could say he's almost a co-lead of the movie. He is similar to Jean Grey, has like a really extensive like flashbacks and origin story told throughout that movie. And he's different in that he is sort of more of an anti-hero, but he is a hero in the Marvel universe. I mean, he's had decades of comics where he's like a superhero, right? So that to me sort of follows the same pattern, is like take a hero and pair him up against a a different hero and have them. And the other examples I thought of were like Doctor Strange versus Scarlet Witch in Multiverse of Madness. You know, like originally the plan was to be Nightmare, but then they pivoted it away. Hey, wouldn't it be more interesting if we took one of our good guys and made them a bad guy? You know. And then the third example I thought of was most recently Thunderbolts. Like, you know, there wasn't a villain in that movie until they decided, hey, what if we take Sentry, who has sort of a dark persona, and make him the bad guy too? So all that to say, it is very in line with what Marvel has done in the past, but they're doing it with a character like Spider-Man, who, like I said already, has like such a great rogues gallery. I could definitely see fans being like, "Well, why did you have to go to that when there's plenty of Spidey villains that you could have done it with?" I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and also, you remember, like, I guess it would have been the late 70s, maybe early 80s, where sitcoms, there would be the episode where they introduce the guy that then it like leads into the next episode, which is like the spinoff, like this one leads into the Jeffersons, and then you watch the first pilot of the Jeffersons. What it felt like to me in this one was like, this definitely feels like, well, like I said, there, for me, there was no pragmatic purpose in it being Jean Grey over being anyone else. So what it kind of felt like is, we know X-Men is coming, right? So this does feel like, like I forget what the term was even they used to call it, but
Like
I
a
think it was
backdoor
like a,
pilot.
what's that? Yeah, backdoor pilot. Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of. But what's weird about that is like that. I kind of liked the idea that she was villainous in this,
Yeah,
but I
same.
also thought it was a weird turn for her to be villainous in here before we're shifting her into like being the hero of another franchise coming. Like, I mean, I guess you could do that with Namor as well, but like they didn't announce that there was going to be a Namor movie before he popped up in Black Panther 2. You know what I mean? So this feels a little bit more backdoor piloty than it does in other places. I mean, I guess it's not that much different than like a post-credit sequence introducing the Hammer before we get Thor in the next movie. It just, I don't know, it felt a little bit more, Craven is not the right word, because Craven would mean that they didn't do a good job, and I think they did. It just, I don't know, something about it felt weirder to me than it normally does. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I do have thoughts about her characterization that we could talk about, but before that, the thought experiment I wanted to throw out to you though was, I started to think, well, there have been decades of Batman movies, right? And we've seen all of his rogues gallery, and there's a part of me that like is if next year they came out with a Batman movie and his antagonist was like Zatanna, you know what I mean? She's a magic user. She's originally primarily thought of as a good guy, but in this version she's bad. And it opens up a different kind of Batman story where he's fighting magic. He's usually fighting gangsters and monsters and things like that, but this time he's fighting like the supernatural or something like that. Like the movie may be good or bad, but that does sound pretty interesting to me. And like I would actually enjoy seeing that type of different kind of Batman movie. So in that sense, like I think it is again sort of dependent on like me personally. I'm very excited for the X-Men, so like getting that introduction in Spider-Man like totally worked for me. But yeah, I
Yeah,
could.
well, to be clear, and you were the convert that got me hooked on X Men. You were the first person that gave me an X Men issue to read. Like I think it was Jim Lee's X Men #1 was the first
Right,
X
right.
Men I read, and I think you gave it to me. And I love the X Men, and that's the reason why. So I'm absolutely on board with the X Men, and I agree with you. I'm very excited about an X Men movie. I guess I don't know, man. Like, and I know you don't feel this way because you liked the introduction, but it did kind of feel to me like, do you not trust that we would be interested in the X-Men without this? Like it kind of feels like, is this the crutch that allows you to be
Right.
like, well, this was in $1 billion movie, so maybe you'll come back for it over here. But like, that there's a track record of people going to watch X-Men movies in droves. They weren't yours, but do you think people aren't going to show up for your good version of the X-Men if they showed up for Apocalypse? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, if they never made an X-Men movie, and I was just judging the movie on its own merits, like I would still have enjoyed it. Like I didn't enjoy it because it was a tease. It was just,
Right.
and again, I think that does go to the fact that they did utilize her throughout the movie. Like if it had been more of a like last minute cameo kind of thing, I obviously wouldn't have liked that. Because at the end of the day, like, and this gets to the characterization. Like to me, she is the villain of the movie. Like it's not really damage control or Metzger. Like it is her. Like she is a villain. She does very villainous things. And I think people's mileage may vary on her redemption at the end. I think there are people who might feel like her redemption at the end isn't earned, or Spider-Man's turn towards being sympathetic for her probably is maybe unearned, and that I can't disagree with people's opinions on that. But what I think is pretty interesting is that going into an X-Men movie where she is somebody who is a lot more villainous, or more on the anti-hero, or however you want to describe it. It does set up a world to me like where the X-Men themselves have an opportunity to be a lot more dangerous, and a lot more like, when I think of like that first school of students at Xavier's, they're always like goody two shoes, like kids in their uniforms and everything. And I know that's the 60s vibe, but even like the 80s and 90s versions of them seem like kind of just like buttoned up, like nice kids who are persecuted because they have their powers that they can't control. But it did open up the idea to me that it would be fun if they are like actually dangerous, like because they're teenagers and they have like godlike powers, and
Right.
they make terrible choices, and so that to me is an interesting dynamic
Right.
that
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, if maybe if what this is signaling towards is rather than a school of, a school for youngsters, like we've known, what
yeah.
if what if it's portrayed more as like an anarchist collective? You know what I mean? That's interesting. You're right. I could see that being, because then at the very least, while you're not supposed to necessarily sympathize with villains, you could understand why regular people would be scared of them.
Yeah. Yeah, so that opened up possibilities to me that were pretty exciting. I like just thinking about an X-Men movie where, they are destructive, they are dangerous, they are teenagers with, out of control hormones, and but somehow, they need to channel that energy to do good. I think that's somewhat interesting to me. So that's why I wasn't turned off by a villainous turn from Jean Grey, where ordinarily, like, that is something that does bother me when heroes, are kind of portrayed as just more like gritty, or whatever. In this case, it didn't bother me because I thought it was kind of interesting. So
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think they did a better job of executing a thing that is a cliche in comic book movies and in comic books, frankly, but they still sort of fell victim to it, which is like two heroes doing things that they think are right, and that's why they end up battling each other before realizing at some point, wait a minute, we don't have to fight each other. There's
right.
something out there that we should both fight. So like that, I mean, that's every issue of everything. Wolverine and Hulk beat the shit out of each other before they realize one of them is being controlled by somebody's whatever. So like that beat has been played a lot. So, but what I will say, and because we started talking about both and we sort of veered into Brand New Day, I did want to come back to one of the things that I liked about the beginning of Spider-Man that Spider-Noir leaned into throughout, which is it felt like the first 25 minutes wanted very much of Spider-Man was trying to capture not just the vibe but the storytelling of a comic book, like the way that it felt episodic, by which I mean sort of like panel to panel, like this was a page, like the battle between these two characters, that was a page, and then the next page would be, like 3 weeks later. And that felt like a comic book. At a certain point, it didn't feel like a comic book anymore, which is fine. Most of the superhero movies don't actually feel like comic books. This one, it felt like, was trying very hard at the beginning to capture that. Spider Noir to me felt like it was trying to be arch to the degree that it felt like an old pulp story or an old comic
Yeah.
story throughout. Like it never stopped being that because of the performances, because of the way that it was shot. And for me, like I said, I'm more of a fan of something that takes a big swing, even if that swing is largely a miss or a bunt. Like I don't know. I like when somebody goes for it. It's one of the reasons why, as bad as Nicolas Cage has been in some things, I love Nicolas Cage, because I know it's never like he's never made a safe choice in his life. And Spider Noir feels like it's not a safe choice. And it's insane, frankly, that it exists. I think it's only because Nicolas Cage said he wanted to come to TV that they would have spent that much fucking money on a TV series that's this weird and specific. So I don't know. We'll see if we get a second season, but it was insanely expensive, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And they haven't announced the second season, and the show didn't really wrap in a way. Like they had a bit of a tease that the detective agency would continue, but other than that, I mean, it was pretty much a one and done story. So that's the other thing, is that like as much as I did like Nicolas Cage's kind of out there performance, there's a part of me that wished it had been kind of like a younger, newer actor who could carry it like to multiple seasons, who was doing like and make similar choices, like kind of like the hard boiled detective thing, but like
Yeah, like,
but
well,
that
like getting somebody like Jimmy Simpson to play that part would have been because he's a similar kind of like big actor, but you could theoretically shoot for 7, 8 more seasons with him. Whereas like like you could even see in sequences where they would go to action, there's a reason they would pull the mask down before the fighting would happen, because there's no way in hell Nicolas Cage was doing a lot of that, so.
Yeah, no, and just speaking generally about Spider Noir, I mostly liked it. Like a lot of series, like not just comic book ones, but just series in general. There's a lot of the sense that there's like, a good movie version of this story in an 8 hour show, And I
Yeah.
did feel that way with this, except whenever they would take these like really oddball diversions, like the flashback episode that shows him in the POW camp and the mutant spider and all that. Like that kind of stuff worked better to me as an episode of a show than as like a 5 minute, flashback in a movie, like so
Right.
in that sense, I'm glad it was a show because I wanted more space for that kind of thing. But it was more just the overall story, like the Silvermane versus the mayor kind of thing. Like it felt like I was like, well, this doesn't feel like a story that needs 8 episodes,
Well, 100%. Well, and one
Yeah,
of the things I realized while watching that show, I think the reason that didn't bother me as much as like, well, while I was watching the Spider-Man movie, what bothered me was when there. How do I put this? Like there were vibe. It was a vibes show,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
like if you were on the wavelength with that vibe, you would enjoy it whether it was getting work done or not. And I think the reason that I liked that is because in the moments where I felt like I wasn't vibing with the Spider-Man movie, it meant that the passages that I didn't care about, I had nothing I wanted to hold on to. You know what I mean? Whereas with Spider Noir, I was like, I don't know how this scene folds in. I don't know that it's necessary, but this performance is hilarious and weird, and I love the way that they shot this scene for absolutely no reason other than that they wanted to have it shoot up through a cigarette holder. You know what I mean? Like the
right.
the idea that they were let off the leash of allowing this to be visually, sonically interesting, even if it wasn't getting work done. I kind of feel like, I don't know if you've heard this. This is not related to movies, but this theory about how one of the reasons that creativity has been suffering in recent years is that people don't have time to be bored anymore.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah,
always something occupying time. And so because of that, people don't get bored, and so they don't get creative in order to solve their boredom. And I kind of feel like one of the things I love about a creator like Vince Gilligan, who made Better Call Saul and Pluribus, is that he forces you to move through a story slowly, because he wants you to be able to luxuriate in things that you don't understand what the purpose of them is for, or anything other than the feeling of the thing. And for me, that's like the culmination of a few years ago. I was turned around on Twin Peaks. I was turned around on David Lynch by watching Twin Peaks: The Return, and it was because like that show really broke down for me like the tyranny of story that I didn't realize how much I had been sort of like on board with, which is that whole thing of like, how does this scene add into the importance of the story? Like, is this scene needed in order to tell the story, and if not, what's it doing there? And then I watched Twin Peaks: The Return, which was arguably like 8 of the 16 hours was stuff that was not quote unquote necessary for the plot, and
right.
I loved it. And then I watched Pluribus, and I feel the same way. I mean, I think his stuff is more necessary. He just the pacing of it is different. But then, so that's what I think when I watch Spider Noir. Is it's like absolutely some of this is not necessary at all to tell the story, but some of it is necessary to do what they want, which is just to evoke a time and a place and a feeling.
Mhm.
And we just don't really see, it doesn't seem like we have room for that in a lot of our storytelling anymore. It's crazy to me that movies have gotten longer, but they also seem like they're more forced to get down to business. So like you watch an old movie, and like you watch a film noir, and it's like 72 minutes long, and there's a whole plot in there, and it's like, how the hell did they do that in 72 minutes? And but we can't tell a Spider-Man story in less than 2.5. Like, I don't know how that works. I don't know. It's weird to me. I don't know how to explain it.
No, it makes total sense, and I think it's like it's dependent on the project itself, because like there are some movies or shows or ideas that lend itself to like that kind of like quiet contemplation, and then there are others like where you're like, yeah, move it along, right?
Yeah.
But
Well,
I was
and
gonna
listen,
ask.
I know I'm in the minority in that, like, why would anyone come to a superhero movie or a comic book movie with the intent to like get a slow contemplative thing?
Well, but
So
this one does make sense for that because, like you said, it is a vibe and it is a mood, like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. Like
yeah,
it borrowed the tropes of the noir specifically for that reason, which is to say, like, if you like this kind of thing, this is the kind of thing it's going to be.
did you watch both black and white and color or just one?
I think, well, so we did the first episode black and white, second in color, and then the rest in black and white. Mostly, I just wanted to see what the color looked like, but the black and white looked phenomenal.
I did. It wasn't until like maybe episode 3 or 4 that I was like, I'm gonna watch this one in color just to see what it's like. And I mean, no, I take that back. I think I'm in the minority. I did like the color because it was like interesting and a little like obviously like hyper saturated, and they had a goofy name for it. Most people I read reviews from or listened to on podcasts didn't love the color. I thought it was really cool, but I did watch the majority of the series in black and white because it
Yeah.
definitely was
I
better.
mean, yeah, to be clear, I actually did like the color as well. Like it
Yeah,
reminded me of that like the era where they were still where like it was, they had Technicolor, but then they had like all those other processes that were sort of like Technicolor but weren't as expensive or like high quality, and so they didn't like look quite as good. That's what it felt like to me, and like in a charming, endearing way. But I'm also just like a huge fan of black and white, so if I have a choice, I was gonna like I was the guy who bought the DVD of The Mist just because they had the black and white version that
yeah.
Frank Darabont wanted to put out and couldn't. So I love black and white regardless. So, but yeah, I like the color too. There was almost like like you said, like it's almost as if like it was a either a colorized movie or like one of those things where like what was I gonna say? The like you watch a movie, it's an old tube TV, and like the color bar adjustment is not quite correct. I kind of like the way that looked.
Yeah, and as soon as you turn on the color, especially if you do it during one of the nightclub scenes, like where Felicia Hardy is performing, like you're like, oh, like this is like fun, like on its own. I think all of the costumes and the sets, like in color, were really well done from a production standpoint. So it's
Yeah.
worth at least clicking it on just to see what they look like, you know?
Yeah, honestly, it reminded me a lot. I don't know if you're a fan of. I loved Dark City, the movie from the late '90s. But like Alex Proyas, when he made that movie, it was clear he was making a film noir. But again, in '98, they weren't going to just let you put like a major science fiction film out in theaters that was going to be in black and white. So there's a similar thing where like it's a rich color palette, but there aren't a ton of varieties of color. You know what I mean? And that's sort of the way that they sell the. It's not exactly monochromatic, but you sort of get that vibe.
Yeah. So the other thing, I did like their use of like a big Spidey Rogues gallery in Spider Noir. I think the guy and some of them I'd never heard of, like the guy who shoots electricity. His like name was
Hmm.
like Megawatt or something, and I'm like, okay, if you tell me it's a Spidey villain, I'll just have to trust you on that because I don't. But his like kind of over the top theatrical performance was really great. I didn't love the styling on their tombstone. Like I thought he just kind of had a bumpy face, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
and
No,
uh,
and I agree with you. And like after seeing the one in
yeah,
Brand New Day, and like particularly that one of the things they lean into from the comic book, which is like the super bright suits that he wears.
yeah.
Like I feel like that probably was lost a little bit from the black and white and stuff. So
Yeah, and then the Sandman, even though he didn't actually do a lot of sand stuff, I did like the actor and the a lot of that performance as well.
yeah, I like Jack Houston a lot. I know him. I only know of him from Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah,
But I mean, I'm not saying he got this part because of Boardwalk Empire, but like a story that takes place in the 20s, and like he's it very much seemed like that was a head nod in that direction. But it does occur to me that one of the things that I didn't, I'm talking about pulp influences for Spider Noir, but this really is, it feels like very much like, well, what if Spider-Man was Dick Tracy?
yeah, yeah,
Like in the way they redefined the villains was what's the strange deformity that they have that makes them part of the villainous community. You know what I mean? And I thought that was really fun. Like that whole sequence where there was like the alley where the character that was weird was hiding, and they went in to do the raid. Like all of that reminded me a lot of not so much the Dick Tracy movie, but like the actual Dick Tracy comics. It reminded me a lot of.
Well, that's a good way of bringing it back to like the comparison because so as I said at the beginning, I was kind of trying to rewrite Brand New Day into something more, Chris approved, right? And
I
that's kind
mean,
of where I landed, which was sort of like a, like let's say Spider-Man is fighting like street level villains and take your pick. Like it could be Tombstone or Kingpin. Or like let's just say for the sake of argument, it's Kingpin because that's what a lot of fans like in the last 3 or 4 years were saying. Like, when are we finally gonna get the movie where Spider-Man teams up with Daredevil to fight Kingpin? And like independent of the Daredevil show, let's just say that that's what the movie had sort of been. What I would argue is that movie would probably be great, but I also don't think it would have made like $2 billion because similar to like what you're saying about the unexpected fan affinity for mobsters and Dick Tracy kind of like pulp origins. I think it
mhm.
does exist, but I also don't think that it's like that, break the box office type of audience, right? Whereas like, I don't know, like, and that speaks to sort of like, who the fuck knows why Spider-Man Brand New Day took off the way it did. I think it was a combination of the cast who's relatively young. I do think like having ninjas and Punisher and Hulk in the trailers like helped it a lot. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess my bigger point is like I do think that that movie that was closer to a pulp comic book like type, even like a Sam Raimi like Darkman or something like that, like I kind of feel like that maybe wouldn't have been as successful as this one is, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I can see that. But I also would say we knew so little about like I mean we saw a ton of stuff for Spider-Man, but we knew so little about what the actual plot of the movie was or who the villain was. I mean, aside from, I'll talk about the normies, what the normies understood
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
like,
yeah,
people spending a lot of time on Reddit. They didn't know who the villain was, but what the movie was sold on is the stuff that you talked about. It's cameo by the Hulk, cameo by the Punisher, the cast of people who have had enormous hits. We've got the cast of the Odyssey and et cetera, et cetera. But like I was thinking about as we're talking about it, it's whatever 4 days, 5 days after the movie came out. It does occur to me though that most of the tickets that were sold for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, which is the box office breaking record days, that kind of all happened before there was any word of mouth. You know what I mean? Like, so all of those tickets were sold based on the marketing campaign rather than the word of mouth of how good it was or revelations of what actually took place in the movie. So it does make me think like there's something to be. I think I told you, I texted you, I was like, would we say that a successful opening weekend is earned by the marketers and a successful second weekend is earned by the filmmakers? Because that's kind of what I feel like we're saying to some degree is marketing. The marketing of this one kind of deserves the win here, at least for the opening weekend. We haven't even gotten to the second weekend yet. We know it's been well reviewed now, but like that opening weekend was sold out before anybody saw anything.
yeah. And honestly, like I just said, like I think that that does sort of speak to the unknowability of like at the end of the day, I mean, I think it was just like a combination of a bunch of things that made it like the most successful movie ever. But I keep thinking back to the fact that like a lot of people say like, well, it's a given that it's Spider-Man, so it's going to be successful. But there have been plenty of unsuccessful Spider-Man movies, So it's like,
Well, but
go ahead.
I mean, sort of, right? So I mean, like the lowest earning Spider-Man movie was I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and didn't that still make like almost $700 million or something?
Yeah, it did, but I mean, I think there's a reason why they didn't continue that series. I think that it was critically a flop, and I think that I don't know I don't know. I mean, obviously business
Yeah,
decisions.
I guess what I'm just saying is it feels like Spider-Man might be a different Spider-Man and Batman seem to be different metrics than most other superhero movies in the sense that like, barring absolute garbage,
Yeah,
Batman and Spider-Man are going to put asses in seats. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not saying you can't fuck it up. I'm saying it's harder to have a massive failure that
yeah,
features one of those two as the main character.
yeah. And I guess what I'm saying is that like obviously a movie that breaks $2 billion versus a movie that like hits 800 or 900, like there's a huge difference there, right? Like so, like at the end of the day, I think that they hit on something that allowed it to break that threshold because it wasn't that long ago that we were saying that the superhero movies were dead.
Yeah.
Like,
Literally the last superhero movie
I know,
was when
right?
we were talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I don't have the answer. It's just a very interesting question to me of like, obviously it's the character. Like that's already going to get you a certain threshold, like you said. And then it's the cast because people love Tom and Zendaya and they kind of live, parasocially through, their Instagram feeds or whatever, you know. And then it's the cameos, people love like not in every case, but in this case, people were really excited to see Punisher show up in a Spider-Man movie, so that's one. And then the mystery villain, like you said, like I actually don't think that most people going into the theater who aren't Reddit ninjas like us, like even knew that Jean Grey was going to be in the movie. Like she wasn't in any of the trailers. Sadie Sink didn't say she was Jean Grey in any of the. So I think that really was a total mystery to 90% of the people who walked into the theater. So
Okay, and so I have to ask you this
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I think you're right. If they're the kind of people that didn't know Jean Grey was going to be in this, right? Which means they're mostly going because it's a Spider-Man movie and they've seen the other Spider-Man movies. This movie did not really lean into the she's an X-Man, she's part of the X-Men universe stuff to the degree that like, do you think people who didn't know she was in this, do you think that was a value add to them when they realized that she was? Like, do they even know who Jean Grey is? Do they care who Jean Grey is? Like, I don't even
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I don't think so because I was listening to a few podcasts where some people would say like in their audience when the name Jean Grey was up on screen, like people went whoa, and then other people who were like it was totally dead silent, you know. So it really is dependent on, you know, your
Yeah.
audience, right? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think that there is still that thread of people who, you know, obviously Marvel lost them, right? But they did exist for a while where they did like following breadcrumbs, you know, like the whole Infinity Saga. Like there were people who were normies who were like, well, I've watched, you know, all of them, and there's this thing about Infinity Stones, you know, and they got really excited to feel like in the know on like the trail that was being. I think those people weren't there prior to this movie, and they might be now because they're like, you know, when Sadie Sink is in a trailer for an X-Men movie, they're like, oh, I remember her from that movie that I saw 3 times, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
No, that's a fair point. And listen, people have given them so much crap about not prepping for not paving the way to Doomsday because of sort of the aborted Kang stuff. I guess how can I be like I can't be the hypocrite that's like how come you didn't plan Doomsday better and then get mad that they're clearly planning the X-Men a little bit more deliberately, you know what I mean? So
yeah. Hey, well, I mean, on that note, you know, D23 is coming up in September, I believe, and everybody's expectation is going to be that they're going to announce the cast of X-Men. I think that's one of those, like, this happened also with the, I think with the Doomsday cast announcement. There was like, it was just conventional wisdom that they did the initial YouTube rollout with all the directors' chairs of the names. And then like for the next like 3 or 4 months, I kept hearing about like, well, you know, they're going to do a second video with like the next 12 or 13 names. And it was, again, it was just like commonly accepted, you know, oh, well, of course they're going to do that. And they never did because that was the cast, you know. So I take all that kind of stuff with a grain of salt. But I don't know, people are saying, well, of course they're going to announce the cast of the X-Men at D23. And so we'll see. I mean,
well,
I'm
if
sure
people
you
are saying it, we know that it's not true.
right.
That's what we've established.
Yeah, my only expectation is that it does, like I was telling you yesterday over text, it does put Marvel in a pretty good spot to like be in the position to launch a very popular franchise, which is the X-Men, and to do it with very popular up and coming actors and actresses who, you know, hit a demographic that people want to see in movie theaters. So, in that perspective, I think they've really set themselves up really well. But yeah, I don't know. And this movie was part of it. Like I actually think that Spider-Man: Brand New Day ended up. I didn't really think of it going in, but after seeing it, I'm like, oh, I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer. Like to have, you know, I think there was a version of this movie that didn't have Zendaya in it. You know, like maybe they moved past, you know, his old circle of friends, but I mean, it's a no-brainer to have like one of the biggest stars in the world like in your movie, and then play up, you know, obviously their off-screen, you know, relationship. So
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm very excited for the Kane Parsons version of X Force that's obviously going to be coming soon.
what's the name of the guy who directed Obsession?
Oh yeah, Curry Barker.
Cory Barker. Yeah, he just directed a Weezer video. Did you see that?
I did not see that.
Yeah.
Wow, that is the most. That is for someone who is so known for being like of the moment, young, hip YouTube guy. That he was doing a Weezer video is
I'll,
somehow very funny to me.
I'll tell you this: like Weezer has never looked older. They look so
Yeah,
they
it's
don't.
very funny to me that the guy that the YouTube phenom is directing a video by the same dudes who did a music video where they co-starred with the cast of Happy Days.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess I don't know if you have any grab bag of thoughts on the movie. I had a couple, at least for Spider-Man: Brand New Day. I hate the title. Like I think I didn't like any of the titles of the previous trilogy. Like I just think they're, with the exception of Homecoming. I thought Homecoming worked because there was a homecoming dance in the movie. You know, sticking with the home thing, I think, was just kind of lazy and kind of boring to me. And then I heard an interview with Dustin Daniel Cretton, the director of the new movie, where he was talking about the themes, and he was talking about how this movie to him was about the community that you build around yourself, like the web of relationships that you have. And I thought there is a comic book called The Web of Spider-Man. Like call your movie Web of Spider-Man or something, you know? And then it really made me think. And then after that, I was like, but there's so many great like Spider-Man titles out there. There's Peter Parker Spider-Man. There's Spectacular Spider-Man. You know what I mean? There's so many that you can name your movie, and then they you know they just pick the stupidest title. So I don't know. That's a big gripe of mine that probably I only have, but that was one for me.
No, I didn't like the title, but I didn't have a reason other than that I was just like, I don't know. That sounds like a I don't know. That sounds like an indie movie from 2007 to me.
Yeah.
Brand New Day. I don't know. Like it would be a story about a guy who's newly off drugs and it's like I don't know, kind of a boring title. And also I don't know like I'm not sure. I guess I understand thematically how it connects, but it just seems like the most generic way in which you could express what's going on in this world at this point.
Yeah. And then my only other thought, as far as just like miscellaneous things, is apparently they did cut a cameo with Rosario Dawson as Claire Temple from the Netflix series, and I can see why they might have cut it just for like pacing or whatever. But I am kind of disappointed that in that opening montage they didn't just go ahead and throw in Daredevil. Like, why not? Like, maybe it would have created the expectation that he'd show up later. But I don't know. I mean, you're already doing a montage of quick cut him fighting different villains. That could have been kind of fun. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that all the time. Like one of the reasons I like that first 20 minutes is it did the thing. You know how you and I talked about one of the things we kind of liked about the first Superman, or not the first Superman, but the James Gunn Superman was that it was like it felt like we went in media res. Like there's a bunch of characters running around, and this is a world where all this shit is already happening. Like we're 17 years into the Marvel universe. It should feel like even in a Spider-Man movie, other people are doing shit, and not just villains, they did that later with Bruce Banner and stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. Like literally just a cameo from Daredevil or whoever the hell else. You know what I mean? Luke Cage. Like you got a bunch of characters that live in the same city as him, and some are less expensive than others to put on screen. You could have just popped him in there for the sake of feeling lived in.
Yeah, and that montage like covers like a 4 year period of time, so like you don't have to worry about continuity or whatever. Like it's just
Right. In fact, yeah, stick Daredevil in his old gold costume, and then you've set it
right.
to when you think it happened, and you don't have to worry about, oh, how does that tie back in? So
Yeah. So I don't know. We will have to wait for the Spider-Man Daredevil team up that everybody wants. But we got a pretty great Spider-Man Punisher team up, right? I thought that you said that was one of your
yeah.
favorite parts of the movie, right?
Oh, for sure. That's the one thing. The biggest takeaway for me was that I was worried about the dynamic of the two of them, whether it would work, whether it would feel forced. And what I liked was while John Bernthal was obviously playing a slightly different tone to the character than he does it wasn't so far off that it felt like a different version of him than the one that's in the TV show. It felt like this is what happens with an R-rated character in a PG-13 movie. Like you don't get to see some stuff. That's just the way it boils out. But I liked his performance. I loved their rapport, and I didn't feel like it was a betrayal of the character, which is a delicate balance because if you watched One Last Kill, you would not have imagined that guy could pop up in your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and have it work. So yeah, I really enjoyed everything with their dynamic, and I love the idea of the whole Staten Island frame of reference for what we don't know happened, but there's just like this consistent disagreement on their part about how it transpired. I liked all of that.
Yeah, I thought he was great. I mean, I haven't been up to speed with his portrayal from the Netflix series or from the new seasons of Daredevil. I didn't watch his one shot. I mean, I get the gist of because I've seen Bernthal in a lot of other things, but yeah, I thought he was great. I thought he was used really well, and I think that's one of the strengths of just Spider-Man in general is that like he is in the comics like a team up character. Like he's always teaming up with the Thing or Nova or Wolverine or whatever. Like he just lends himself to have these interactions with other Marvel heroes. There was the other hero besides Daredevil that I thought would have been fun for him to pop up in that opening montage would have been like Ms. Marvel. I think that would have been cool since she's from Jersey, and you could have had like a Spider-Man, Ms. Marvel kind of team up in that little window at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and I always feel like I don't remember what comic it was that I saw, but it was someone else's comic, and then there was just like three panels where it was like a news station reporting on something, and then they were asking for legal analysis from She-Hulk as she was like walking out of the courtroom.
Yeah.
I wish that they would just have Tatiana Maslany pop up as like the voice of legal reason anytime something happens. Like I know there's whatever weird controversy about She-Hulk, but I thought she was great, and I would love to just get random cameos of her, like on C-SPAN, talking about the legal ramifications of whatever the hell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Any final Spider-Noir or Spider-Man Brand New Day thoughts from you, man?
No, tangentially connected to this, but
Yeah,
I am deeply disappointed that Wonder Man was canceled, and it clearly seems to be a weird theme that if you're not Black Panther, you're a black character in Marvel, you are going to get sidelined or canceled or never made, and it sucks because all of them have been pretty cool to some degree. I mean, I was lesser of a fan of Ironheart than some of the other ones, but all of them have been cool, and it sucks that they keep getting sidelined or canceled. Wonder Man in particular was a fantastic show, probably my favorite of the TV stuff so far, and the fact that it was renewed and then unrenewed really blows. So
Yeah, I think it really sucks. I think Wonder Man was like such a great case study for doing a show about a character nobody cares about, doing it in a way that is completely unexpected, and but just doing like really high level, wonderful storytelling. Like it just like was completely. I mean, I think you're in the same boat. Like, I don't think either of us expected it to be like a show we'd be talking about, and you know what I mean. Like when we heard about it, or even like those initial trailers, I was like, "Eh, it looks fine." Like I don't. I mean, I'll
yeah,
watch
I
it.
mean, I'll be honest. Literally, the only reason I even turned it on is because I love Yahya Abdul Mateen.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if he hadn't been in it, this would have not even hit my radar. And then I watched it, and I was like, you know what this show did was it gave us the ultimate actual buddy story. Like, there's so many superhero movies that manufacture false like camaraderie between characters that I think feels like kind of smug, snarky bullshit. And then you watch like a genuine relationship between these two guys grow, and I'm like moved by the end, the sacrifice that one character has for the other, and it was like really moving. And then to find out all of that work is amounted to like you said, we don't know how to make this into Funko Pop, so we're not bringing it back. You know?
yeah. And I think what's especially sad about it is that with a lot of the other things that have been canceled or never come to fruition, I can give like a little bit of credence to the idea that maybe just the ideas weren't baked enough, or like the story wasn't there, or they just couldn't nail it right. But with Wonder Man, like there's clearly like a jumping off point for a second season. Like and they clearly had ideas for what that second season would be. And everybody on the creative side was game to do it. The talent was, so it's clearly obviously just a business decision. So that's what's always going to feel really like lame when it isn't a creative decision. It's just the business is changing, so we're not going to greenlight this stuff that doesn't fit on a backpack or whatever. So that's pretty disappointing. And looking forward to the future of Marvel. Like at least the three movies that are coming out in 2028 are Ghost Rider, X-Men, and Black Panther 3, and all three of them are going to have action figures and posters and T-shirts and everything. So
Yeah.
and potentially character actors walking around Disney parks and shit. So
Yeah, listen, I can't wait to see the costumed version of Ghost Rider wandering around the park.
he's got like one of those like toy motorcycles that he's like between his legs.
Molded plastic flames around his head.
Yeah, yeah, that's
But
gonna be.
no, I have a lot of hope for that though, because it does feel like one is the culmination of an old and very successful franchise, the Black Panther ones, and then the other two are big swings for going in new directions, the Mutant Saga, and my hope that Ghost Rider can lead into some of the more supernatural, dark Midnight Suns type stuff. So fingers crossed that both of those land well, because I would love for that to be one of or both of the new directions that Marvel heads in with their films.
Yeah, no, I agree. Cool. All right. Well, to wrap things up, I guess we should probably wrap up at this point. Next, coming up on the calendar is Lanterns, which debuts August 16th, I believe, which is pretty soon. I don't think we'll be doing episode by episode recaps like the way we did with Peacemaker, but we'll definitely come back and talk about that show, which I'm crazy excited about. It's probably the first DC thing that I'm like all in on because, I mean, just like so obviously I'm a big fan of the writer Tom King, who was responsible for Supergirl, but like the very first trailers for Supergirl led me to think, it's not going to really be that very close to the comic, so I wasn't as excited and anticipating that one. But Lanterns to me like feels very Tom King, and it feels very Damon Lindelof. I like the cast a lot. I love a kind of like back to the word grounded take on the Green Lantern Corps. I think that's just really cool. I don't know if you've seen any like spoilers about like the first few episodes or not. Like no big swings that they're potentially taking on this like bother me, even as a huge fan of Green Lantern. I'm like, take all the big swings you want. Like that's totally fine with me. So I'm looking forward to it, and I know you are too, right?
Yeah, no, I'm crazy excited. I mean, you pointed out a lot of good reasons, but honestly, I'm showing up because of Garrett Dillahunt.
That guy has never been in anything bad, right?
I've never watched anything bad that he's been in. I'm not saying he hasn't, but no, that guy never phones it in, man. It's always fun and quirky. It's like it's always borderline too much, but in a perfect way. So I'm just interested to see who he is, because I feel like they haven't been clear on who he is. But like, you don't hire Garrett Dillahunt to play like third tier nobody in the background. You know what I mean? So I'm just curious who he is and what the hell he's there for.
I also appreciate that the most recent trailer, which they call the final trailer, does reveal a lot of like the plot of like who they're up
Hmm.
against and everything. So in that sense, I don't feel like there's a ton of like predictions that we need to make.
No,
Like,
it's been pretty clear what's happening here.
yeah, so in this case, I mean, maybe we'll watch a few episodes and then weigh in after we have a few episodes under our belt and react
Yeah.
to it. But
Or yeah, or we could do like do the pilot and then come back after the
yeah,
series is complete or something. Yeah.
yeah, that could be fun. So, Green Lantern Corps, I'm all about it. I'm excited for it.
Same.
Do you have you ever owned a Green Lantern replica ring? Because I've owned at least like two.
I think you know that I haven't. The only superhero ring I ever had was
Uh,
the Phantom ring that they used to give away at 7-Eleven when the Billy Zane Phantom movie came out.
no way.
Um, I swear to God, I had two of them.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
look that
so
up. I don't think I've ever saw one. I
genuinely look it up. It's awesome. Like to this day, I would still wear it if I still had it.
They came out with a collectible Green Lantern ring that was made out of like pewter, like silver, like with a shiny emblem in the middle of it that probably cost like $25 or $30 that I bought online like a million years ago, and I thought it was really cool. And then probably when they brought Hal Jordan back from the dead, maybe around that time, a lot of comic book shops like DC sent them little plastic Green Lantern rings as giveaways, like for the front counter. That those were actually cooler because they actually looked more like the actual Green Lantern ring. And so I've had at least two. So yeah, those are my bona fides. Like I've owned two Green Lantern rings. So
You got Hal Jordan beat then,
yeah,
or you tied, I guess.
yeah. So
So
yep,
awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. So that'll be our next chat, I guess. Right? Is lanterns based.
yeah, that'd be great. All right, man. Good talking to you. We'll chat again.